Greetings. Today we're going to be talking about China's expansion into the rest of the world. And when I say expansion, I don't mean expanding their borders, at least not geographically. What I mean is expanding their borders in a sense through trade. It's important to understand that at this point in history, China is by far the leading manufacturer and producer in the world. Some estimates say that China controlled almost 70% of the world's wealth at the time. They had certain advancements such as the iron plow and the wheelbarrow that allowed them to produce tons of food. As we learned, they made tons of scientific achievements. They had a tight-knit family controlled around the philosophy of Confucianism. So in many ways, the Chinese really didn't need any other outsiders. However, they were still looking to make wealth. And in order to do that, they had to expand their trade. Also, importantly, China had one product that just about everybody around the world wanted, and they were desperate for. Do you know what that is? You got it. Silk. Using various trade routes starting from China, the Chinese were actually able to move their silk as far westward as the tips of Europe. Silk was so expensive and it was so popular that even Roman nobility would just take little patches of silk and sew it onto their togas as a sign of wealth. The Chinese guarded their secrets for producing silk very strictly. As a matter of fact, anybody who was caught sharing secrets about how to create silk was immediately put to death. The Chinese did not want anybody else to have their secrets of silk creation. So in order for the Chinese to make money off their silk, they had to start to establish trade routes around the world. And so what they started to do is they started to create certain roads and pathways where traders would meet up with certain traders and they would start to exchange gifts and goods. And then that's how silk would eventually start to move from China in the east, moving its way into some of the trade capitals in the Middle East towards the west. This 4,000-mile network of trading routes became known as the Silk Road. Even though China became fantastically wealthy through their trade of silk, and when I say fantastically wealthy, I really mean it. As a matter of fact, China would send out junkets of boats sometimes just to go visit other countries. And the other countries would actually start bringing China gifts, not even trading, just giving them gifts. And because if they didn't give China gifts, then China would refuse to trade with them, and nobody wanted that. However, in addition to the products that were going out of China and the wealth that was coming into China, it wasn't the only thing that was being traded on the Silk Road. As I mentioned before, King Ashoka from India was sending out many missionaries, and so that became a tradition for India. And once these missionaries started to move their philosophy around, they met up with other traders on the Silk Road. They started to exchange their ideas, and the people of the Silk Road began to take Buddhism back to the people of China. Now, you have to understand, most people in China, well over 90% of them, were very poor peasants. It wasn't a pleasant life they had. They worked long hours, they were exhausted, and so Buddhism gave them an opportunity to have a more happy, more peaceful life through inner meditation and inner thought. That's one of the reasons why Buddhism became so popular in China. Now, once Buddhism got to China, it didn't stay exactly the same way that it was in India. You might have visions of the fat Buddha with the bald head and smiling, and that's just because it's taking into consideration certain Chinese values, such as if somebody was, for lack of a better word, chubby, then that was a sign of wealth, and if somebody was smiling and happy, of course, that's a sign of happiness and prosperity. However, we know that that's not how the ancient Indians saw Buddha. That just goes to show that when an idea comes into a new culture, it's going to change in certain ways, and that's certainly what we saw in China when they incorporated Buddhism. This process of changing one thing into another due to culture is what we call diffusion. Well, that's all for now. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Goodbye.